So some of the questions I've been asked to just sort of mention in opening are, how can planning be more inclusive? How can it better meet the needs of diverse communities? And there's a few things just to reflect on. One is that what we're starting to look at within the department, and you'll have seen in the white paper, is the power of digital planning. We've actually got a system of planning that's kind of quite old-fashioned. It's quite based on PDFs. It doesn't use data in a way that could be much more enriching of our information and our understanding of what we have now in our built environment, but very importantly, what our communities have as assets, as opportunities, and as ways to sort of think through to the future. So if you think about it, I don't know if you've ever looked at Data Shine, which is an amazing open source bit of information. You can just Google it. And if you look at that, you can look at community spatially, you can look at housing quality, you can look at housing tenure, you can look at skills, you can look at ethnicity, and you can understand how the different patterns of our lives play out in data. But what that actually helps us do is understand and use data to actually understand where you have a multiplicity of issues and opportunities or disadvantages playing out. And I think one of the really exciting things about where we are with planning at the minute is we can be so much smarter about understanding our natural environment and how it sustains and supports and enhances communities and opportunities for everyone, and to do that in a way which is very engaging. So the other thing we can do digitally, and we're testing this out with a number of local authorities at the moment, is actually use new platforms to be much more engaging with people. So much of this is anecdote and some of it is evidence. Many people will have come across kind of organizations like and apps that they use sort of day to day in doing engagement. But quite interestingly, anecdote is showing that whereas it used to be, here's a room, put some boards up, invite the community in to look at a scheme and or maybe even some policy and some plans, you'd have had a kind of couple of hundred people through the door. They would have engaged really well in the project and they would have had an opinion, and that opinion would have been captured. The really interesting thing about lockdown is the extent to which it's kind of really speeded up the take up of digital tools for engagement. We're doing it now. And what that's showing is, instead of getting a couple of hundred people engaged, you get thousands of people engaged in processes and in schemes. And those are conversations about policy, but also conversations about individual projects, and that engagement is much, much more representative. So in both those ways, there's actually a really exciting opportunity at the minute to use the digital transformation of the planning system to engage much more fully with communities, for things to not be at a time that's okay for somebody who doesn't work and maybe hasn't got childcare commitments and can make it across town to a meeting, but it actually can be in the time that suits you, where you can engage, or anybody can engage in a conversation about what's happening in their communities. So what does the planning system need to be better at doing? What are we sort of targeting for it to do? One is to make sure that there is much more housing coming through the system, and that meets, obviously, it shifts the balance of housing being available in the right place to meet communities' needs. And we all know that obviously there's disproportionately different groups in communities have different access to housing. So that's a kind of really key, important aspect for us. The other thing that's really important is actually looking at housing and neighbourhoods and the design of places in the way that is actually meaningful for communities. So if we ask, if you think about where you live, what you like, what you don't like, what we as planners can do to actually help describe a better future. We've issued something called the National Model Design Code. It went out after Christmas, and that is a really good framework. You can use it as a toolkit professionally or in community groups to actually help say, okay, how do we identify the issues that are really important, that we need to give some shape to or definition to, so that when we're actually either negotiating with a local authority as a community, we're negotiating with a developer who's bringing forward some proposals, or actually we want to go further and actually adopt policy, where we can say these are the things that are important. These are the things that are important about the quality of the street, the overlooking on a street, the way public space interfaces with the home, the way the home addresses the street, and then all those sort of issues that we know make for really successful places. And really importantly in the National Model Design Code is we're bringing in very directly aspects of looking at climate change journeys towards net zero and aspects of how our climate awareness is starting to pull through into our decisions in planning policy and individual projects. So I'd really commend that to you as something to sort of look at, use it as a sort of tool to test ideas with your colleagues, with the communities that you work with. It's a really good tool. The other question that's really interesting is to look at how organisations can, and actually particularly organisations that have got this responsibility to engage and work with communities and bring forward development, how we can be better at representing the totality of diversity that we have in our communities. And the first thing I think is really important to do is to understand your communities and understand those routes to engagement, really meaningful engagement, which is what we were just talking about. But also not seeing no one of us fits in one group and firmly sit there. You know, I am a over 50-year-old mother of two. I am white. I'm privileged insofar as I own my own home. I have a little garden and I'm near local parks. I'm actually complex in terms of my background. I have life experiences I wish I'd never had. And I'm not, I can't, although I can appear to be in a certain mold, I'm not. I am many things. Everybody in this call are many things. And how we recognize that people should never be put into a single box, but might actually have lots of characteristics, protected or unprotected, which are important and all are so valued. So it's back to this point about the many voices, the many perspectives are always so much richer, and how we find time in our policy discussions, in our professional lives, to hear all those voices and all those perspectives. We will only be better. Our decisions will only be much stronger. And actually the results and the things that we do on the ground will be so much more powerful. I've been really lucky in my professional life to have some quite startling experiences, and some of my most amazing were actually when I was I ran a charity called Land Aid, which is a basic property industry charity, and we funded quite small scale grants to organisations that worked with disadvantaged children and young people across England. And listening to young people who were maybe 18 or 20 or even 16, and they'd already had so much life experience, which I would never hope for anybody to have to go through, you know, being kicked out from home. Sort of one young kid who'd been in the criminal justice system, had come out of prison, had nowhere to stay, slept in a telephone box. I mean, these are all horrendously heartbreaking experiences. What is interesting is unless we open our minds to those conversations and those experiences and listen to the broadest set of perspectives, then we will never know. We'll never understand and never know all those views that we might want to take into consideration. Now, that I've just given you a couple of extreme examples, but we need all those conversations, all those different needs to be in the room when we're making policy, is the point I'm making. The other thing I think that's really powerful, and actually the department, nobody is perfect as an organisation, but I'm really struck about MHCLG as a department and quite how very intentional, excuse me, it is around diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And that does it through recruitment programs, so obviously blind applications, but also, excuse me, I'm just going to drink, our summer intern program, which is a really good way of enabling people to sort of come into civil service, experience it, particularly people from a BAME background. And then if people want to stay and it works for them, then they're encouraged to stay in the organisation and potentially even go on submit to go forward into getting a planning qualification. And then we've got our grad programme as well, and also programmes internally within the organisation that are sort of saying that you might be in an organisation, but actually do you get the opportunities once you're in the organisation to progress? So we have programs which actually work with different colleagues from a BAME background to sort of say, okay, where are you trying to get to? What support do you need? Do you actually, do you want somebody to do a sort of test interview with you? Are there ways that you can feel confident that you can progress in this organisation and you can see the routes through to progressing? So again, not making that a sort of something that should just happen by osmosis, but being quite clear when putting support around both applicants and also people in the organisation is something that shouldn't be done by accident, but should actually be done in a way that's directly and intentionally supportive. So that's something that we do as an organisation, and I'm very happy to talk that through. And Amy and Darlene, who are going to join us, have been very involved in that work. So being an organisation that's inclusive, particularly a planning organisation, means that we have to actually make sure we're understanding our communities that we're working with, tailor the approach. There is no one size fits all in any aspect of our lives. Don't just talk about it, turn things into action. Understand how different people in your organisation can take different leadership roles. Make sure if you've got diversity inclusion in your work plan that it's properly resourced, and that you do seek support from everybody in your organisation. And also, as I was saying, be holistic. Think about what everybody brings to the conversation from those different perspectives, and make sure that we're recognising that people come with an authenticity in policy discussions, and how we bring that into how we think about our challenges and our opportunities, and do that very much in a collaborative way.